We're good.
Just gather around as best you can. We're not going to try to make this really long, but some of that may depend a little bit on you if some of you want to share in a few minutes. I'm Mark's oldest brother, Ken. He called me Kenny. That's what I was growing up. So I live in Nashville, Tennessee. Our middle brother is Steve here. He lives in Superior, Wisconsin. So there were 3 boys growing up here in Chattanooga. This was Mark's lifelong home. And we're so grateful that you're here today. I am a minister by trade, but I'm going to let you breathe a sigh of relief. I'm not going to preach a sermon today, but I do want to share some things. We just want to make this a celebration of Mark's life. I mean, he brought joy to all of us in his own special way, whether he was at work or a neighbor or a friend or a musician or whatever it might be, the relationship. And we're just here to celebrate his life today and to thank God that he blessed us with him for 60 years. Now, even though this service has some structure to it, just meaning a little bit of order, we want it to be informal. So we don't want you to be intimidated to share something if you want to. So what we're going to do, I'm going to say a prayer in just a moment, and then my brother Steve is going to come first, and he's going to share some personal reflections. He's also got some words from some of his family members who couldn't be here today to share with you. Then we're going to just open it up if anybody has something that they would like to share. I know that Donna and Denise want to share a few words, so we'll let them go. And if anybody else is here and you want to share something, you're more than welcome. I know this will make you uncomfortable, but if you would come to the microphone, then everybody can hear you. And you may be uncomfortable doing that, but if you don't want to share in this gathering, just what we've been doing is great. Sharing stories among each other, and after we get through, you'll have an opportunity to do that as well. After everybody's had a chance that wants to share, then I'm going to bring some of my reflections, and I'll close with a prayer. And then, again, Denise and Donna, they've got these wonderful refreshments. We've got some drinks for you to be able to enjoy. There is a little book. If we'd like a record that you're here today, so if you haven't signed it, before you leave, sign it so that we know that. But after we get through, you can eat and fellowship. If you've got to go, we know that many of you, all of you, have taken time out of your Saturday to be here. We appreciate it so very much. But thank you for being here. And again, let me just say thanks to Denise, thanks to Donna. These are the ladies that got the pavilion for us. They got the food, the decorations, the pictures. They really put a lot of effort into this. And that's just a little bit of what they've done and meant to Mark over the years. And so I really appreciate it. If you haven't seen their shirts, they've got a shirt that says Gone But Not Forgotten. Got Mark Castleberry. July the 1st, which would be next week, would have been his birthday till March the 15th when he passed away this year. So again, Donna, Denise, thank you especially for all that you've done. So let me just say a word of prayer, and then I'll ask Steve to come and share with us first. Father, what a glorious day you've given us. We thank you for the good weather. We thank you for this great setting that we can come and celebrate the life of one that we all loved in our own way so very much. For me and Steve, he was our brother, and we loved him with a different kind of love than anybody else here. We grew up together and shared life together intimately in our home. And then for the relationships here, whether again they are work associates or neighbors or friends, everybody had a connection to Mark in a special way. And I thank you that they've taken time out of their busy schedule to come and just pause for these moments to just celebrate a life of a person that we all loved, and a life that meant so much to us, that brought us joy, that brought us laughter, that lifted us up. And I thank you for that. You gave Mark the ability to be that to all of us. He had a good time and liked to cut up. And I'm grateful that as I've seen people coming in today, everybody's come in with a smile and stories about some of the good times that they had with Mark. And that's the way life ought to be. Life is too short to be spent fussing and fighting. We need to be uplifting and encouraging one another. So just thank you for this privilege we have to share together, and bless those that will share publicly, and just draw us closer together and help us to remember the good things Mark taught us about how to enjoy life and to implement those in our lives as well. I pray those things in Jesus' name. Amen. Steve?
Thank you, Kenny. Like I said, as I met some of you, and if I didn't meet you, I want to meet you before you leave. So make sure you see me. I want to have a conversation with you and learn your connection to Mark, because I don't know most of you, and it's been a pleasure to kind of meet you. But as I told some of the people that I talked to, I'm going to share some things with you maybe you don't know about Mark. You know about the Cigna Mark, right, or the Multiplan Mark, but do you know the real Mark, the one that came about as a little infant and we saw him grow up? So I'm going to share some of those things with you. My family couldn't be here. We live in Wisconsin, and they're actually all over the country. They couldn't be here, and so I said, if you want to share something, I'd be glad to read it. And a few people said, probably not. I'd be afraid to even write something up. But my daughter Betsy, who is a spunky little girl, probably 30 now, says, I will do this thing, and I want to do it. So she says, this is for my daughter Betsy. She said, it's no surprise that most of my memories of Uncle Mark center around music. Mark was an incredibly talented musician. He didn't have any kids of his own, and looking back, we were probably pretty annoying, but he was so kind to us. He had us over to his house once and let us kids mess around with his keyboards. We had a blast. I remember hitting the same trumpet button over and over till his dog started howling. I don't remember us going back after that. He gave us our own keyboard so that we could play on it at Granny's house and protect his. And we spent hours playing that, so she's thankful for that. I love the albums he composed, and he did that with Tim, and just the pleasure that brought our family, that brought it to me and brought it to all my children was incredible. She says, I must have been about 10 years old when I heard his song, Back to Egypt. You with me? Back to Egypt, right? Oh. Yeah, it's got a beat to it, man. It's not like somebody's coming in with some tambourines. And it says, she decided that's what she wanted to walk up the aisle with on her wedding day. Oh, wow. Back to Egypt and come in. Since she didn't end up riding down the aisle on a camel, she says, I went with a different song, but we recorded me jamming to the song in my wedding dress, jamming with Back to Egypt. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not. I should send that to you. We wanted Mark to see that, so she shared that. She ends up by saying, I'll always treasure the music that Mark left behind for us, a piece of Mark that will carry on forever. And we still listen to his music today. This is for my wife, Susie, who couldn't be here either. She says, the first time that I met Mark was 45 years ago. And my first encounter with him was memorable, to say the least. Steve, that's me, had brought me to his parents' house to meet the family and spend the weekend. When we arrived that evening, Steve's dad had already gone to bed, and Mark was out with some friends. Steve's mom showed me to the room that I was to sleep in, and we all said goodnight at about 10 o'clock. To be honest, I'd been a little bit nervous about meeting his family, but I already knew Kenny, and their mom was very sweet. Being really tired, I went right to sleep, but woke up suddenly a few hours later to the sound of a man yelling and screaming at the top of his lungs. It actually sounded like it was something out of a horror movie. Now, I was from a small, quiet town, and Chattanooga seemed like a big and dangerous place to me. My first thought was that someone had broken into the house and was proceeding to go from room to room, murdering everyone. I froze in the dark room, my heart pounding. Thankfully, moments later, I heard Steve shouting, Mark, Mark, wake up, stop. Then he continued talking in somewhat lower tones to Mark. I heard Steve's parents' bedroom door open and his mom also talking. As she went back into her room, I decided that whatever was happening, it probably was not a murder, and I finally went back to sleep. Remember, I hadn't met Mark yet, and was a little apprehensive about him until the next day when I met him and decided he was actually not a killer after all. Mark was prone to nightmares, which Steve had neglected to tell me. And one of Steve's favorite stories that he told me later was the night Mark was sleepwalking and shouted, a sword, my kingdom for a sword. You gotta love somebody with an imagination like that. Mark and I always got along pretty well, and the three of us had a lot of fun when Steve and I were newlyweds. One weekend we were in Chattanooga. Steve wanted to take me camping. It was a hot and muggy day, and it was raining. So Steve got out the old canvas tent to put up in the front yard to make sure there were no leaks in the tent before he actually tried camping in it. Mark came out, and the three of us sat on the damp floor of the tent, playing cards and listening to the rain and just talking. It was a fairly tight fit for the three of us, as we had to avoid touching the sides or top of the tent in any way so that a leak wouldn't start coming in. We were all sitting cross-legged, and as Steve leaned forward to deal the cards, his knee bumped Mark's leg. "Don't touch my leg! Don't touch my leg!" Mark suddenly exploded. "I can't stand for someone to touch my leg." It was then that I found out that one thing Mark was not fond of was even accidentally touching his skin on a hot, muggy day. It became one of the jokes the three of us shared any time one of us didn't like something that everybody else was doing. No matter what it was, one of the three of us would start laughing. "Don't touch my leg! Don't touch my leg!" Mark used to give compliments, and some of you I'm sure have heard compliments from Mark. But they were compliments to Susie like no one else had ever given her before. She says, "I'll give you two examples. When Steve and I were dating, Mark once told me that I had beautiful hair. 'It's really beautiful,' he said. 'It's sort of the color of wheat. You know, it's the kind of hair that you see on a girl when you're standing behind her and you think she might be pretty but might not. She might turn around and you think, oh no. But when you turn around, you're not beautiful, but you're okay.'" She says, "Thanks, Mark." The other example is when Mark had come to visit us for a weekend in Alabama when Steve was in graduate school. We're really on a tight budget, and that's putting it very mildly. And I made a simple, inexpensive meals. Little Smokies and macaroni and cheese, just in case you're wondering. You can live on that for 3 years. After finishing one of them, Mark told me, "You know, Susie, you don't fix a lot of food, and it's not really special, but the way you present it always makes it seem like it's more than it is." I miss him, she says. When I walk into the store and they're playing songs from the 70s, I think of Mark and the ones that he and I like together. And suddenly a huge sadness comes over me. Music was always such a big part of his life and his conversations, and I can't hear some of them without thinking of him. It's hard to realize that he's really gone. I miss his smile and his laugh, his sense of humor, and his crazy fun ways, but I'm thankful for the memories. All right, last one, this is from yours truly. I went over my list with Kenny this morning because obviously we're going to have a lot of the same stories. So you'll see Scratch, he'll tell that story and so forth. But we had some different ones too. I have so many memories of Mark that I won't even be able to scratch the surface of all those memories. But I've chosen a few to try to relate some things about Mark that some of you may not know about. We're all different, aren't we? When Kenny played sports, I did the Boy Scout stuff. Mark didn't want to do either one of those things. He tried playing t-ball, but when he hit the ball, which didn't happen often, instead of running to first base, he ran straight to third base, with all of his teammates and his coaches screaming at him, "Stop, Mark, stop! Go the other base." He mostly played t-ball that year for the free snow cone he got after the game was over. I can still remember seeing him after the game with a smile on his face and the snow cone juice all over the front of his t-shirt. It was I was sort of guilty of that myself, I must admit. The snow cone was on my t-shirt deal as well a lot of times. Over time, Mark made it clear that no, instead of playing sports, instead of being a Boy Scout and wearing a Boy Scout uniform, what he actually wanted was a hostess set, where he could pretend to entertain and serve tea to imaginary people. My dad never really understood Mark. But we're all different, aren't we? And Mark reflected that difference throughout his life. And he had fun with his hostess set. Did you ever do that with him? Yeah, I did too. Okay, Mom made us. Mark could get big time upset. I don't know if you know that about Mark, but he could get big time upset. And when he did, you knew he was upset. I'll never forget how one time he came from a church party and was absolutely furious. Someone had got egg on his new sweater. And he was just beside himself. He was Mark. That's the word we use sometimes to describe someone out of control. He was Mark. He was doing a Mark. And it actually took Ken and I both to hold him down, to calm him down and help him get a perspective that you know, we could probably wash this sweater. It's probably going to be okay. You're going to live. I'm not sure the people are that did it to you later, but you're going to make it through that thing. There was another time when our whole family was sitting around the table talking. When someone said something funny, we all laughed. During this laughter, there was a short squeak sound. Beep. My dad looked around and said, "What in the thunder was that beep? Did you hear that beep?" We said we had heard it, but we didn't know what it was. Time went on and someone else said something funny again. Beep, beep. What in the thunder is that beep? My dad asked. Nobody knew. Later we learned that Mark had purchased a tummy trainer. It was a tight belt that went around your waist, under your clothes to encourage you to hold your tummy in. And I suppose that by holding your tummy you wouldn't eat so much. Anyway, when you relax your tummy, it gives a warning to tell you to suck it in again. Needless to say, Mark loved to laugh. There was a lot of beeping going around in our house around that time. I think until Dad said, "Get that stupid belt off of you." Mark was not the best, at least when he was growing up, but also in his later life, in managing his money. I'm just telling you the truth. He was not the greatest at managing his money. He so wanted to spend his money. That's why I sold him the chemistry set I got for Christmas after I was through with it, and for a lot of money. You'll hear more about that later, maybe. He wanted to spend his money, and given my personality and my inclination, I wanted to take his money. In fact, I'll be happy to take any of your money when this event's over. Just come see me. I still have that disease, I think. Anyway, Mark was an easy target for buying a stick of gum from me for a nickel. Back then, a whole pack cost a nickel. But hey, I was the one who walked to Ploger's grocery store. Remember that, Kathy? Ploger's grocery store, a mile away, bought the gum. I was the one to avoid eating it myself. I had to carry the inventory until someone was ready to purchase it. I had to make up for my supply chain cost. I'm covering myself. You see what I'm doing? I know it's gouging, I admit it, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. My favorite example of Mark's spending habits is one day we were in Hickson at Drew's Drug, about to head home. He's about 8 years old at the time. We'd walked down to Drew's Drug for some reason. He stopped at a newspaper rack, reached in his pocket and pulled out the only money he had was a dime. And he stuck it in the coin slot and picked up today's paper. I said, "What in the world are you doing, Mark? We have that paper at home. We subscribe to the paper. We have it at home. And you never read the paper anyway." Mark's reply, "Well, this paper is mine." And Mark never did read that paper, I don't think. He just wanted to spend his remaining dime. And we'll talk more about how he saved his money and how he carried his money later. So Mark realized that it took money to live in life. And he saw me. I sold greeting cards door to door as a little kid because I was cute and people would buy cards that were overpriced because they wanted. Well, somehow Mark got the idea he was going to sell Grit. Have you ever heard of Grit? It's a newspaper years and years ago. And it's essentially a little bitty newspaper of old stale news that no one wants to read and no one wants to buy. And what you do as a kid, you buy like 30 copies of this for like $1 and you go out and sell it for 35 cents a piece and make money. He tried to make money. It wasn't very successful. What Mark did was he went down to Northgate Mall and thought he would sell it there. And I've actually got a card that I found as I was going through Mark's things. So here's a note that that Mark wrote to my mom about this whole incident of selling Grit. "Mom, I am very sorry if you were mad at me. You see, when I got to Northgate Mall, I tried to sell some." And he's got underlined, "No one wanted one. They said it was against the law to sell it in the mall. So I went up to a policeman and asked him, and he said, yeah, it's against the law to sell Grit in the Northgate Mall without a permit." I know Dad will be mad at me. I have found out that selling Grit is not for me. I'm so sorry, Steve, if I made our family look like fools, but at least I tried. Love, Mark. Wouldn't you buy a Grit newspaper now if you had the chance to? Okay. So I tried to make up for all my stiffing Mark out of cash. So when he was older, I would sometimes buy things for him. Not a lot, but I'd sometimes buy things. Once we were in Office Max and he was going to buy a computer printer, he shopped and hemmed and hawed and finally picked out one he wanted and walked to the counter. The lady told him the amount. He reached for his wallet to get out his credit card, and I said, "I've got that, Mark," and I paid for it. What do you think his first words were to me? Thank you? Nope. His first words were, "Well, shucks, I knew you're going to pay for it." I'd have got a lot better printer than that. The reality is, all of us would feel the same way. Mark would verbalize it. In fact, Mark loved to verbalize, right? He was always talking, always chattering, always carrying on. I remember his report cards from elementary school when teachers would write a note or rebuke that says, "Mark loves to talk." But it's because he loved to talk that you're here today. So he has so many friends. He was always open to talking, listening, and often with a cup of coffee and a sweet dog in his lap. Like I said earlier, Mark was very strong-willed. It took a lot to convince him of things, especially in his early 20s. I remember him saying to me one time, to me and my children, I have no idea why he said this. He said, "Steve, you could line up 10 gold experts right now, 10 gold experts, and all 10 of them would say, 'Yes, this is gold,' and I still wouldn't believe them." That's Mark's strong will, and he had it until he died. If Mark didn't want to do things, chances are he wasn't going to do it. Like going to Royal Ambassadors in our church. That was our church thing for boys. As a part of RAs, all the guys were playing touch football. Does that sound like something Mark wants to do?
No.
Absolutely not. So Mark wouldn't play touch football. Instead of doing that, he walked across the road, boxed cigarettes, and started smoking behind the building. And that's the beginning of Mark's career in the tobacco addiction in that road. Mark was so talented with music. He had a beautiful voice and was, of course, awesome on the piano. And what he did with Tim just amazes me, and it still amazes me today. He brought so much joy to me as he performed, whether it was at the little playhouse, at a church cantata, or just playing the piano at home. I loved how he imitated other styles who played the piano. If you ever saw him do that, he could sit on the piano and pretend to be anyone. He could do Mom's way of playing. He could do Liberace. He could do Sylvia McCarriott, who had kind of a honky-tonk Christian piano playing where she'd come up and down the scale, and my kids would rock and roll. It caused us to laugh. I, like all of you here, love Mark and miss him so much. I'd give a lot right now to have a talk with him, to listen to him play piano, or to hear him laugh when I tell something funny. Mark, I miss you. I love you.
Denise, you want to go first or Donna?
Donna, you go ahead.
So you can go ahead.
All right. Hey, everybody. I met Mark at Cigna. I think the majority of y'all are Cignites, or were. But Mark and I used to hang out on break times, go outside. We'd watch people. We'd look at people, make up stories. We played practical jokes on people. I think one of my favorite practical jokes that Mark and I did was the paper hole event for Rachel Garrett. So Rachel Garrett used to take paper holes and put them all over my desk. And for about 2-3 days, I was like, who keeps doing that? So my little spy, Mark, was watching. He goes, it's Rachel, it's Rachel. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get her back. So Mark and I, we had 3-hole punches at our desk. And we were trying to get a lot of paper holes. That took forever. But every time Mark did a paper hole punch at his desk, you'd hear a little kee. You'd hear his giggle. And I told him, I said, this is going to take forever. We're never going to get this done. He goes, well, let me go ask Patty Hedrick if she's got a secret. So she told us about this lovely copy machine that collects all the paper holes when people make copies and hole punch stuff. So there Mark and I were with all these paper holes. And it was raining that day, and I was like, to get back at my friend Rachel, we were going to put all the paper holes in her umbrella. So when she went outside, it would rain down on her. So here Mark and I were at the copy machine, because I didn't know how to take it apart, but he did. And we had the paper hole punches. There must have been 1 million of them. And I was holding the umbrella. And here comes Donna Morgan walking down, the director of our area. She just kept walking. She looked at us, she smiled, and she said, I don't even want to know. She said, I'm late for a meeting. And Mark and I looked at each other, and then when she went downstairs, we started giggling. So here we filled up this umbrella with all these paper holes. Wrapped it up. It was a little lumpy on one side. We tried to balance them out the best that we could. Well, guess what? It stopped raining that day. We forgot all about it. About 2 weeks later, it was raining. And Mark, that morning, I'd forgotten all about it. But when I came in, Mark grabbed me and he said, "You might want to go hide." And I was like, "Why?" He says, "Rachel Garrett's looking for you and she's not happy." And then I was like, "Well," I says, "Karma's a good thing, isn't it?" So then she came around and she told me, she said, "I cussed you out the very first thing this morning." She said, "We were leaving, me and my daughters," and at the time they were 10 and 12. They're now in their 30s married with children. And she said that I opened up my umbrella and she said, "In a rain of paper holes." And she said, I just went, "Done this!" So, and Mark and I just had such a good time getting those paper holes to get back at Rachel Garrett. There's so many stories like that with Mark. I remember Christmas time, we'd chase Dee Powderly around and we'd sing Christmas carols to her and she would get aggravated with us. Another time, we were on the 5th floor at the building. The elevators would sometimes arrive at the same time. Nobody on them. So I'd look at Mark, he goes, "You want to race?" He'd get in one elevator, I'd get in the other. And there we were descending down to the 1st floor. And you could hear Mark in the elevator shaft giggling. And I was like, what is he laughing at? You know, but, you know, I love that man. Shocked that this happened. He was a very dear friend. I have his Scruffy. I know how much he loved that dog, and I hope he's smiling down on us that Scruffy's being taken care of. His brother Jack is teaching him the ropes. So, but, you know, thank you all for coming, and God bless Mark.
Thank you.
Don?
Finally, a Mr. Microphone. A Mr. Microphone that I can use. My name is Donna Davis. I knew Mark over 35 years. Don't ask me what drew me to Mark. I have no idea. But I called him Handsome Hank once I got to know him. Where that came from, I do not know. But we shared a lot of, we called them back in the day stories, things that we remembered from our childhood, toys that we liked. We worked together at Cigna for a while, and then after his mom passed, I had gone to work at Multiplan, and several of us were able to recommend him for a job, and he got on at Multiplan. And that began the 8 years of us getting in trouble, to put it mildly. But we developed a very close friendship, and as over time, he wouldn't go anywhere on the holidays, he'd stay home. So I started asking him if he'd come to my house. "Oh, your husband doesn't want me there." And I said, "My husband does not care if you come to my house." I called him my husband, and I was his wife. And you women out here, I was the main one. Okay? He spent quite a few Thanksgivings and Christmases at my house, but when I started to get grandchildren, I think the kids made him nervous. So he only spent 2 Christmases with us then, and then he'd go to Denise's some. And the last year he didn't come at all because of COVID. I've helped him buy underwear. I've helped him buy clothes. I've helped him buy wedding gifts. He just, the littlest thing, he could balloon into the biggest problem. It just amazed me. But when you explained it to him, and if you were by his side, he understood it wasn't that big of a deal. At Multiplan, everybody knew he was mine and I was his. Yes, Laverne, I said it. I'll give you an example of how special our relationship was. At Valentine's Day, I knew he wouldn't be spending it with anybody. So on the last Valentine's Day we were there, I had fixed us a little lunch, and I had little heart tea candles that I put on the table, and then I made hearts out of Hershey Kisses, and we had our lunch there where everybody could pass by, and I'd just smile and say, "I know you're jealous. I know you're jealous." He ate it up. He loved being the center of attention. He was a very giving person. but I have to make just a little bit of fun. He wouldn't know how to wrap a gift, so many of my gifts came in a saltine cracker box. And the last gift he gave to me were 6 ice trays, white ice trays. And he said, I worried and worried and worried about that, whether you like them or not. And I said, Mark, they're the most beautiful ice trays I've ever gotten. Thank you. But he was a very talented young man. In this frame over here, I contacted Little Theater. They went back in history. They researched every musical he either played in or acted in. I wanted to have some stuff about the UTC Mox, but I wasn't able to find anybody to help me with that. I'm very honored to have been one of his friends, and I appreciate everybody coming today. I know names more than I know faces. He loved to laugh, he loved to have fun, and that's how I always remember him. I know where he's at, I know who he's with. That brings comfort to my heart. But every time I see something weird or something I need to share with somebody, I don't have anybody to send it to anymore. So I need to find me a new person, but I'll never find another husband. But thank you all for being here. He's smiling at us. This makes him happy. Makes him very happy because I can hear him going, oh, I didn't know they'd come. Oh, she's not there. I can't believe it. But anyhow, but thank you so much for coming, and share your funny stories. There's a million of them. We could probably compose a book and make a lot of money. You never know. But thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve just heard that idea about a book and making a lot of money. He'll be happy to publish that if you want to bring him the stories. Anybody have something they'd like to share? If you do, would you come to the mic? Again, no pressure. We can sit around and talk about Mark after we get through with the formal service, but if anybody's got something they want to share, certainly want to give them that opportunity. Come on up.
I can't believe you're making me like this.
Well, we're taping this also for some of the family and friends that didn't get a chance to see it, so that's another reason we want you up here. Come on up.
Okay, so I didn't know Mark probably as long as most of you, probably about a year. He started working at NCRED shortly after I did, and he was already friends with one of the people there, so I'm like, oh, you know. But he was just so sweet. He was sweet to everybody. The first time I formally met him, I was sitting in the break room. He comes walking in, and he says, "Greetings!" And without thinking, I just said, "And hallucinations." And he laughs. He's like, "I wanted to say that." He's like, "But I didn't think anybody would understand." And so that was our thing, greetings and hallucinations every time we saw each other. And he was just so sweet, and he was just so friendly.